Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About It. I'm Tamara,
And I'm Sheena.
and today we're talking about drag kings.
Ooh, I like drag kings.
What do you like about drag kings?
Mostly the theory, since I've never actually seen a proper drag king show, but I would love to.
Yeah, drag queens are much more popular than drag kings. In fact, I didn't even know drag kings were a thing up until a couple of years ago.
Well, I mean, drag queens have had movies made about them. They are much more prevalent in pop culture. They appear a lot more in like circus acts, like we have a circus act here that is where the kind of ringmaster is a drag queen.
We do. What was her name again? Oh,
Cathay.
Cathay Specific. Cathay Specific, a play on the airline.
Indeed. And
Or Cathay Specific. Something.
something like that. Anyway, the detail does not really matter. The point is we don't really get drag kings.
So let's start with what a drag king is.
Yes, please.
Okay, so a drag king is someone who identifies as female who dresses up as a male.
Right, and usually in some sort of performance, like on a stage.
Yes, drag kings, just like drag queens, are performance artists, and that is a very important fact that sets them apart from people who are transgender or who cross-dress.
Right. So it often they sing or have some kind of like show, right?
So they either sing, they I don't want to say mime, lip sync. I think comedies is also like comedy shows, like stand-up comedy is a thing. So let's get into drag kings.
Yes, please.
Okay, so drag kings go a way back. So the first known drag king is Susanna St. Livre, and she was an English playwright and actress, and she's the first woman known to act in men's clothing as a man.
Like on the stage.
Yes, she was a playwright and actress, so it was a theatre thing. So it wasn't that she lived as a man, it was acting as a man. Okay. And then in the late 1800s, early 1900s, drag kings really came to the forefront in the English music hall, theatre hall scene. And they became very popular. And they became so popular that modern pantomime, women still play male roles. And that's where that came from.
So Sarah Waters and her Tipping the Velvet novel is based on that concept.
Yes, exactly. That was the drag king culture. That's where it came from.
Aha.
Okay. And then in New York, we see Annie Hines, who is also an actress, and she was extremely popular. And she was a male impersonator. And she actually eventually married her dresser, Annie Ryan. So Annie and Annie got married back in the day, which I think is amazing.
How? Did people genuinely think she was a man?
No, people knew she was a woman, so I'm not quite sure how they got married. It might have been this whole thing of, women in romantic relationships are okay because they're women. Who knows? I didn't actually read too much into their relationship.
All right, Heather, we need some clarity on this. That's a shout out to Heather Rose Jones, who does the Historic Motif podcast, and she does amazing things. She's done an episode on women dressed as men in history, and that's pretty cool. So this is kind of overlapping with that, hence the shout out to Heather to do something more on this. Okay.
So it's important to note that drag kings identify as women. They don't identify as men.
Well, if they were identifying as men, they would be something else, right? They would probably be trans or gender neutral or queer or something.
Sure, but you do get trans men that are drag kings as well.
Okay.
But generally, it's someone who in some way identifies as female.
All right.
Okay. We know now where drag kings kind of started. So we're going to look at some of the differences between drag queens and drag kings. Okay. So drag queens usually are all about creating an individual identity, and they're stars in their own right. However, they create a lineage. So someone will be a drag queen, and then she will bring someone under her wing and teach them the ways, and then that person will usually take on whatever that the first drag queen's last name was. And they're almost like a house. Okay, so you'll get people with the same sorts of names. But they generally perform as individuals. Drag kings, on the other hand, generally perform in groups or in troops. So it's much more of a community kind of a thing than drag queens, which, if you think about it, really isn't that weird, considering women like to create little communities.
Boy, we really are a community creator, aren't we?
We really, really are. So drag kings tend to create these troops, and what you do find is that members of the same troop sometimes share a last name, but not always. It's not the same as the drag queens.
Here's another interesting thing though. Drag queens are men, and men are very particular about their last name and carrying on the lineage. So do you think that that could be...
Possibly. The patriarchy likes to rear its head, so probably.
Isn't that the truth? Okay.
Okay. So drag kings are part of lesbian culture. They've been a long time part of lesbian bars, lesbian festivals. It's a tradition that's been around for a while. However, not all drag kings are lesbians.
Seriously?
Seriously. Apparently, there are straight women who are drag kings. There are bisexual women, asexual women, whatever. But it doesn't always have to be a lesbian. But it is part of lesbian culture.
Huh. I would not have said. Okay.
Okay. And like I said before, you'll get trans men who also do the whole drag king thing. And an interesting thing that I've discovered while researching this is that there's also faux queens. A drag queen that is identifies as female. So these are trans women, who dress up in the drag queen style. And they usually perform with drag queens or sometimes with drag kings as well. And they do the same sort of performance art. They comedians, singers, lip syncers, but they identify as women.
Well, we've seen this every now and then on RuPaul's Drag Race.
We have. We've had some contestants who are trans women who are drag queens. And at the time I did wonder, are you still a drag queen? And the thing is, yes, you can still be a drag queen.
Okay.
Doesn't change it. Okay, so there are actually a lot of drag king events. So you get drag king beauty contests, drag king festivals. The British cabaret organisation has the Le Burlesque Drag King Extravaganza, where they're trying to promote drag kings as a performance art. Then there's the International Drag King Community Extravaganza, which is the largest annual conference in the world where drag kings come together and they further the art.
Dude, I want to go to that.
I know, wouldn't it be fun?
It'd be amazing.
Okay. When it comes to drag names, okay, so if you're familiar with drag queens, most of the names are puns. Or they're really funny. So the same thing happens with drag kings, except the format tends to either have a sexual type name or something that is really macho. So names like Moby Dick or Remington Steele. So so that's the kind of stuff that you get. It's not always, but that's the kind of names that you would expect. And again, people who belong to the same troops tend to have the same surnames, but not always. So then, what actually is being a drag king about?
Looking like a guy?
Pretty much. So it's the performance art of presenting as male. Okay. And that takes in illusion, costuming, as well as performance. Okay. So in terms of the illusion, we have breast binding. So we need to take away as much of the softness and curves that creates a woman's bodies to make someone look much more male. Okay, so then facial hair plays into this, creating facial hair that looks believable. Creating eyebrows that look like male eyebrows, making them heavier, making them squarer.
I'd never paid that much attention to male eyebrows before, but okay. I'm just going to take your word for that.
Yes, apparently it's very different. Okay. Hair plays an important role. Like women tend to have longer hair, but not always, but also the hairstyle. So making sure that the hair looks male. And then there is also the illusion of creating male genitalia, so obviously not out and about, but creating the illusion that it's there so that the body looks male. Okay. And then finally, the performance of masculinity. So walking like a man, talking like a man, body movements that are very male. Drag queens tend to have very flowing movements. They, use their arms in like very graceful ways, that kind of a thing, to look more female. So drag kings have to obviously do movements that look a lot more male.
That is so cool. You know what I want to see is I want to see RuPaul's Drag Race, but for drag kings. That's what I want to see.
Actually, it would be really cool just to see maybe RuPaul's Drag Race with drag kings in it as well. Why not? It's Drag Race, not Drag Queen Race.
You're right. Eh?
Although we'd have to change some of the terminology because...
Sashay away.
Yes, or maybe less... means, what is it? Gentlemen, start your engines, may the best woman win.
Well, that could work too. But actually, that's a cool idea. All right, anybody know RuPaul? Send RuPaul a message and say, hey, we got an idea for you. But this is once again one of these things where the gay male culture gets a whole TV show, and I don't think most people even know drag kings exist.
It is. But drag has been a lot more, male drag, or males in drag, to be clearer, has been in media a lot longer. So even if you look at something like Rocky Horror Picture Show with
Shakespeare. I mean, just it goes way back.
No, it does go way back, but it's just been in your face a lot more. I suppose with lesbians as well is that, and maybe I'm just talking out of turn completely, but especially with the whole thing of women who present as butch, dressing in much more, I don't know, like in trousers and shirts kind of aesthetic, and maybe women tend to try to stay away from that, from trying to look like men. So drag kings aren't as much of a thing.
I don't know, and there's for me a very, very clear distinction between butch women and drag kings, and not all butch women are drag kings, and not all drag kings are butch women. No, you know what I mean? So
no, sure, but maybe that's why it's not as...
No, I think it's a simple case of women are overlooked very often. We are not producing media the way men are producing media, and so we just kind of fall by the wayside.
Perhaps.
Alright, so if you know of cool drag kings, then give us a shout. I'd actually love to have one on our podcast.
That would be fun.
Be amazing. In fact, I'd like to have a couple. I could talk to drag kings, totally. Be really interesting.
You could do Sheena's Drag Race.
That's all for this week. I'm Sheena.
And I'm Tamara.
If you enjoyed the show, consider becoming a patron. Patrons get exclusive content.
Becoming a patron helps us keep this show and all the other shows on the Lesbian Talk Show channel going. So it helps lesbian businesses. It helps other lesbians get out there. Join us on Facebook on the Lesbian Talk Show chat group. Let's maybe start a conversation about drag kings there.
Absolutely.
Share with your friends.
Yes, and you can actually rate this podcast again, because Apple went and changed to Apple Podcasts from iTunes, right? Mm-hmm. And then they went and took away the ability to rate for a while. But that's back again. So go rate us.
Yes, go give us stars, leave a review, do all of those good things.
Yes, and leave a review, because even if you don't hear from us, we love it. I share it with all of the podcasters, and then we high-five each other.
Also, your reviews, your ratings, all of that helps other people find our podcast.
All right, let's go now before we talk everybody's ear off.
Bye.
Bye.